Hey, welcome to Ike's Vintage Tech. On today's episode, I've got the same 386 from before, but this time I'm putting it back to its original factory config. We're installing DOS 4.01 and Windows 2.1. Stay tuned. Thanks for watching. If you like seeing these old computers being brought back to life, back to their original life in this case, please consider subscribing. It means a lot. All right, let's get to this. The purpose of this video is to get Windows 2.1 installed on this. Now, in order to do so, I'm going to have to wipe the drive completely of what's on there, go ahead, install DOS 4.01, and then follow it up with Windows 2.1. You're going to need about a dozen 720K disks. Now, I didn't have a dozen. I have a handful. So what I did is I put a little piece of tape over the second hole here, and then I formatted them in the command prompt on my Windows 11 laptop with this Sony USB drive. Now, not all USB drives do support the 720K format. A lot of these only support the 1.44 meg, no standard or weird formats. This particular one does. Now, when I tried to format it in the regular disk utility that I have, it doesn't even give the option for 720, so you want to bring up a command line and type this prompt that I'm floating over my head right now. It would be format space // F:/720. Once you hit enter on that, it's going to ask you, are you sure? Yes, and go through that. It's pretty quick. You're only formatting basically half the disk, but you are able to get a proper 720K disk in that manner. Now, you can't really do it the other way around. Sometimes they use the same material for all the disks back in the day because it was just cheaper to manufacture and format it as it was and not include the hole. But earlier disks were only 720K. There was no extra space allotted on the things. So in doing this, it's easy to go in reverse. You can't always go the other way. And the other thing I did is the images that I had, I didn't use the typical program I always do, which would be WinImage. I usually use WinImage for most of my floppy disk images. In this case, because it was a 720 disk trying to write to a 1.4 meg drive, it didn't think this was capable. It told me this drive is not capable of 720 or this format, something to that effect. It was, but not in that app. So I ended up using a different disk imaging app called RawWrite. It's a very old image. It was only meant for like Windows 2000, Windows XP back in the day. It'll still run just fine on Windows 11, even though it's a 20-year-old app. It works great. It works. So that was a great app. But let's get right to it. We are going to start with the DOS 4.01 install disk. I've already have the computer turned on. It's at the DOS prompt already, but I'm going to go ahead and hit Control-Delete, get it to reboot and boot to that floppy. All right, here we are at the initial welcome screen to DOS. Now, in this case, I'm going to just hit Escape, F3 to exit. It's going to dump us out at the A prompt. I'm going to type fdisk, enter. And this is your typical fdisk. It's the same in DOS 6. It's the same in DOS 4. No new grounds here, so I am going to delete the primary DOS partition, delete primary DOS, hit Y for yes, and it's gone. It deletes it that quick. And then we want to create a primary DOS, create primary DOS. You do want to use the maximum partition size. In this case, it's a 407 meg drive, and that's well within the limits of DOS 4. It's going to ask to insert the DOS install diskette in drive A. It's already in there. And we are rebooting. So from that, it basically says, hey, let's reboot me. It does its own Control-Delete, and it's going to boot into the actual installer once again, this time with a wiped drive, nothing on it. And here we are back at the installer. It is basically saying drive capacity if you're installing it on disk drive or if you're installing it on a hard drive. If you are installing it on the hard drive in our case, like we are going to need one 3.5-inch disk. Going to go ahead and hit enter to continue. I'm going to choose maximum DOS function. I'm going to accept the predefined keyboard of US. Choose drive to install on. We're going to choose drive C, obviously. I have 0 printers. Let's install the MS-DOS shell. Why not? Accept configuration. And enter. What it's doing right now is it's copying the disk. It's going to make a separate disk. So you're going to need 1 blank disk. You need 11 disks total. I made a dozen just in case one was bad. And the first 4 are for Windows. The other 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah, the other 7 are going to be Windows 2.1. Now it says remove the diskette. And we're going to install our blank one. This is called select copy. All right, we're going to remove that disk. Put the install disk back in. Hit enter. It's asking for the select copy again. Hit enter again. Now, maybe this was designed on older computers that didn't have a lot of RAM. This computer actually has 8 meg, which is quite a bit for 1990. But it's only copying a little bit and then copying it again. So maybe it doesn't think that it has the amount of size it needs, or it was just in case. Some computers didn't have more than 1 meg of RAM back then. And you can't copy 720K over on a 1 meg when you're already using part of that RAM for your initial boot. And now it's going to format the disk. This is going to take a few minutes, as long as it takes to format. All right, so it's basically copying the disk over right now onto the drive, and then after it's done doing that, it's going to ask for the next disk and the next disk, and then boom, DOS is done. It's going to be that easy. All right. The install is complete. Remove all diskettes and Control-Alt-Delete. All right, and it is done. It is booted up. This is what it would boot to back in the day. So basically, you have command prompt, file system, change colors, and DOS utility. Command prompt, pretty easy to figure out what that is. If you want to get out of that, you type exit. It will bring you right back. Your file system. This looks very much like Windows File Manager, very similar to that. Exit file system. Then we're back to the original here. Now you can change colors. So you had a little bit of variance in there. It wasn't much, believe me. And DOS utilities: set date and time, disk copy, disk compare, backup a fixed disk, restore fixed disk, or format. Pretty basic. I don't believe there's any mouse on here, so yeah, it's just keyboard interaction. So let's go ahead and get out of this. Shift F9 will get us command prompt. And from here, this is where we are going to install Windows 2.1. A little bit of house cleaning here. Let's get these unused disks out of the way. My empty coffee cup can go over here now. And let's start with the setup disk. All right, if you do a dir/w/p, because I believe it is a lot of files. I don't know, 48 files. And you are going to look for the setup. It does have a setup right there, setup exe. I already knew that was in there, but sometimes you don't know if it's install or setup. In this case, it is setup. Wants you to read through this: setup program for Microsoft Windows 386 version 2.11. And it's all your typical pre-install stuff. When you're ready to continue setup, hit enter. Now this is Windows 2.11 for the 386. Now they also had a 286 version, probably a little less capable or less resources, and it was for the older computers. The 386 version was obviously for the 386, and it had a little bit more functionality, and it was fine-tuned for this particular processor. It's asking what directory I want it installed in. We're just going to keep it Win386. Hit enter. And it's asking what type of computer you have. This was not for every PC back in the day, because there were different flavors of PC. There's Commodore, Atari, Olivetti, NCR, Mitsubishi. Everyone had a slightly different setup back then. It wasn't all 8086. So they wanted to make sure that you had one of these PCs here. This particular one that we have is a somewhere here. Intel Inboard 386 AT. So it is basically an Intel processor, 386, and hit enter. We should be good to go. No change. I want VGA, US keyboard, Microsoft mouse, bus or serial. Let's see if it gives me any other options. Microsoft mouse connected to serial PS2 interface. I don't know. It is a PS2 mouse, but it is on a serial COM port. Mouse system, mouse connected to COM1. I'm going to go, and it is a Microsoft mouse, but it is not. I'm going to just go with, I don't know. The problem is you couldn't easily change this back in the day. You just basically had to reinstall Windows if it didn't work, from what I understand. When I was in Windows earlier, I couldn't figure out how to change it. Looked it up, and you do basically just have to blow out Windows and do it again if you get the mouse wrong. I'm going to say Microsoft mouse, bus, or serial. It is connected to the serial port using one of those PS2 adapters. And yeah, let's just say everything there is good. And then it's going to go through the process of loading all the files and telling me what disk to choose. So let's watch that. Okay, now it's asking if I want to modify the autoexec.bat file. That's the file that, as the computer boots up, it looks at what it should automatically execute at boot. I don't believe we need to modify any of that right now. I'm going to go ahead and do the same and save the config.sys file. It has saved it, and Windows is installed. Now, it didn't ask to use the additional drivers. It didn't ask to use Utilities Disk 1. I had them just in case it needed it. For whatever reason, maybe that's the other computers that we saw listed there. This didn't need it for this particular motherboard, so we're good. Now, in order to boot into Windows, you're going to need to be in the Win386 folder directory, and you want to type Win386. It's not Win like Windows 3.11 and beyond. And you have to be in this directory. You can't just be in any random directory like Windows 3.11 and beyond, Windows 3.1. And this is the Microsoft Windows splash screen. And this is Windows. Let's see, do I have a mouse? I do not. Wonderful. So, yeah, that is annoying. I changed to a mouse that didn't have the scroll wheel, thinking maybe that was being a little confusing for it. But that is fine. This is Windows. We have notepad.exe. Nothing new there. Alt-FX, you can get out of that. Write.exe. It's basically WordPad for its time. Alt-F(X), I do not want to save. And yeah, Windows is very basic. It is maybe 16 colors at the moment. I'm not sure. I'd say that's probably what it is. Do this.txt. It's a text file of somebody's to-do list that was standard on every install back then. Just as an example, like, hey, you can make this basic text file, which was, you know, not something that everyone could easily do back then on old computers. And it is a nice visual windowed, wonder where they got the name, experience, where before this everything looked like DOS or a basic command prompt. So you got to put yourself back into 1988, 89 when you would have this computer. This would be pretty decent for its time. When Windows 3.11 came out, or Windows 3.1, I always say 3.11. When Windows 3.1 came out, or Windows 3 in general, it too was a huge jump in the graphical user interface, the GUI. And you got to think of this as evolutionary. This is a little bit of computer archaeology that we're doing here, looking at how it used to be. This might look like nothing today. It might look very cumbersome, and it is by today's standards. But for 1988, 89, 90, when this computer came out, this was the modern computer for its time. And yeah, it is very basic. It looks like just a text file, and it pretty much is. But computers didn't have a lot of power behind them back then, and they were very basic, and this was something that they could do with the technology they had at the time. Of course, later down the road, when you've got more power on the processor that runs this thing than all of this, you kind of get pampered when you're looking at newer computers, newer technology. The stuff in your watch can run circles around this, but in 1990, this was basically the best you could get without spending a fortune. This was already a $5,000 computer as configured. I couldn't imagine putting even more money. This like 1990, $5,000. That's a lot of money today, and to have this computer, this cumbersome beast with 2 floppy drives, no CD-ROM, no USB ports, just a serial port, printer port, a couple other small ports. But yeah, there was really not much to it, and you still did everything on this computer. You could play games on it. Obviously, you're not spending a $5,000 1990s budget to play Doom, but it was something you could do, your kid could do. And you would run your business on this machine. You would run QuickBooks, accounting. You would run a file server in the case of this computer, I believe this was a file server for its day. It's got a 400 meg hard drive and 2 network cards coming from a university. So more than likely this was a file server back in its day. And yeah, this was state of the art. Now, there's a few other things you could do in this, such as terminal. You could connect to other computers and basic stuff like that. The other stuff that is in here, you have all your fonts. It just shows everything in here. And if you wanted to see what was on another disk, you would have to do Control A, and that would go to the A drive, and then you would see what is on your floppy drive that way. Unfortunately, don't have the mouse. Maybe I can update that. Maybe it is in the utilities here. I don't see anything regarding mice in here. Let's try another disk. Perhaps additional drivers. Apple Talk. There's an Apple Talk driver. PC Laser. This looks like all just different drivers, different machines. Obviously, that's why it's called additional drivers. Maybe I could run the setup again and we can get into the mouse selection again. I don't believe so. Let's just try setup.exe, see what it does. Alright, it did just have me do the whole install over again, and still no mouse. I'm not going to fight that battle today. But I'm going to show you a few of the things that are on here. You've got calculator, calendar, and you can view day or month. You could print calendars back then too, which was a big thing to do. If you did have, something on here that you made on your computer, a calendar, or a Word document, a lot of times everything did hit the printer eventually. And there is also MS Paint. And if I had a mouse, this would be pretty handy. But you can draw with your keyboard very, very slowly. Yeah, clock, calculator, calendar. And you can run all those applications all at once, over top of each other. And this was something fairly new back in the day. And this is Windows 2.11. Interesting, yes. Useful today? Absolutely not. But this is part of PC archaeology, going back in time, finding out how we used to do these things in the long before times. When I was 10 years old, I was using a Tandy Color Computer 3. And that's all I had back then. I had nothing this advanced. So to me, this is interesting to check out, interesting to see how these things used to work, and it's amazing that they still work today. If you like this video, like, subscribe, tell your friends, all that. I do have a Patreon. I have still yet to set it up completely, but those of you that are subscribing, my one subscriber at the moment, John Obst, thank you very much. He's got a great YouTube channel. You should check him out. I'll link that down below as well. And if you do subscribe to my Patreon, you get stickers, some videos. Once I start doing some more behind the scenes stuff, I'm going to post those on there. And anything else I can think of. Thank you all again to the new subscribers. I am very grateful to you all. And I hope you like the video. I hope you keep watching. I hope I can edit it to look interesting. This is just a Windows install. And I hope you stay tuned for the next one. Thank you very much, and take care.